It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. My lucky day. Don't need a pot of gold.
Good morning, everybody. Hi. Greetings from super really cold Chile. And those of you who actually live in places where it gets properly cold are probably laughing at me, but like I live in the Central Valley of Chile. It's not supposed to be covered in frost and freezing, and it was cold. Like I was dreaming last night that I lived in the northernmost part of Alaska and that I was walking around in just a bare t-shirt because like, it was properly cold. But anyway, today's July 29th, and I want to welcome you to Coffee and Cloud Native. My name is Adrian Goins. Every night, I scour the internet for news and content related to Kubernetes and cloud native and open source software, and every day you'll find me here to share the bits that I find interesting. This is a curated list of content. If I wouldn't use it, I'm not going to talk about it. I try to end each day with new knowledge that I didn't have when the day began, and I'm so grateful that you're here with me so that we can all learn and grow together. We only have a half hour, and I've been running late the last couple of days, so let's get right to it. Oh, that's not the one I'm supposed to start with. I'm supposed to start with this one. All right. Graceful AWS event scaling on Kubernetes using lifecycle hooks. How's that for like a place to begin, huh? Basically, if you use autoscaling groups in Amazon, and those are your worker nodes for Kubernetes, there are certain events that can cause, so if you have like dynamic autoscaling or rebalancing or whatever, Amazon can nuke your hosts. And since it doesn't know that you're running Kubernetes on them, oh well, it's really bad when suddenly, boop, you just like unplug all of your workloads. So here we have a project that hooks into the Amazon API over SQS, and when it picks up node termination events, it will drain your nodes. That's cool. It also will hook into ALBs so that it'll actually deregister instances from the load balancer before draining, and that avoids any 500 errors that might happen before something new replaces it and Kubernetes stuff. So yeah, I found this last night. I thought this was great. I mostly use autoscaling groups in Amazon, and I've had this problem. So I was excited to see that somebody else has had this problem. That's actually important to remember. Pretty much every problem that we encounter, we're not the first ones to encounter it. So somebody else has a solution if we just go digging for it. What's next? Azure Kubernetes Service Support. Oh yeah, this gets the award for most terse news article ever. Basically, in preview now, on AKS, you can launch your stuff with containerd instead of just Docker, which they actually say is Moby, but I never really understood. I don't know. I'm just going to keep saying Docker. Period. The end. Hooray. In preview, containerd, nothing to see. Move along. Thank you, Amazon. There we go. Coffee. Thank you, Microsoft. Thank you, Azure. Oh, I like this next one. Kubernetes production best practices. This actually came, even though it's on learnk8s.io, this came out of the Argo project. And basically, I totally lost my mouse. Wow. I totally lost my mouse. There it is. Okay. I'm clicking and windows are popping to the foreground and there's no mouse cursor. When you're launching something, you can run through this checklist. And so it's just good best practices, like all your container sep readiness probes. Check. Containers crash when there's a fatal error instead of just check. Configure a passive liveness probe. And so as you go through these things, you can not only check these off as being complete, but if you're not sure about why you might need something, you can just twirl down the little arrow there, and it gives you a little bit more information, as well as some places that you can go to find even more information about it. You can not only use this as a checklist for launching your stuff to make sure that you're doing it the best possible way, but you can even use it as a learning guide to learn what the best practices are and go out from there into more information about them. I thought this was super cool. And also, as we're talking about Argo, Argo yesterday released 2.9.4, and they now have support for Windows containers. You still need a hybrid Linux Windows cluster environment. So you'll have to have a Linux control plane and Windows workers. And their instructions actually show you how to use a node selector to target the Windows nodes, and then also how you can use node selector to target mixed workloads, so that if your application has Windows containers as well as standard Linux containers, you can make sure that they get deployed to the right hosts, because you don't want to screw that up. But I also want to mention that if you're using Rancher, ever since we deployed Windows container support, we actually treat it a little bit differently. Most places expect that you're mostly running Linux workloads, and so if you want to target Windows nodes, you have to specifically target Windows nodes. We actually felt that if you're running Windows containers, you're probably in a Windows environment, and you probably don't really care about Linux, because that seems to be mostly the case. So the default, if you deploy into a Windows cluster with Rancher, is that it's going to go to the Windows workload, the Windows workers. And if you want to target the Linux ones, well, then you target the Linux ones. So if you're using a Rancher Windows cluster, you can actually skip all the node selector stuff, and your workloads by default go to Windows. Yay, Rancher. Yesterday we talked about Solo and their whole product line of service mesh related stuff. Sometimes YouTube tells me something terrible about audio. But I look and I'm actually sending audio, and I imagine if I didn't have audio, people would be telling me in the chat. So I think YouTube's just lying. But certainly if there are any audio issues, tell me in the chat. So we talked about Solo. Solo has, I don't have their page up, but Solo has an ingress controller and API gateway with Glue. They have a service mesh overlord that they call Service Mesh Hub. And yesterday, Semaphore has an interview with Idit Levine, who's the CEO and actually the founder of Solo, where she talks about how Solo came to be and their work that they were doing with Google and what they've done with Istio and what they've done with Envoy, and how they've done a good job of carving out a place for them based on looking at what was available and deciding that they could do it better. It also talks about their products and how they fit into the world, such as Service Mesh Hub, WebAssembly Hub. And if you don't like listening to podcasts, well, there's a transcript that you can just skim through and read. Super, super, super awesome company. What I didn't know is when I first discovered Solo and all of their products, it was about 2 years ago at either DockerCon or an early KubeCon. And that was right after they launched, or at least right after they released their products. Ever since that first meeting where they had a guy that was there at the booth, and he was a young kid, and he was super, super exuberant and super outgoing, and I wish I remembered his name, but his passion and excitement for what Solo was doing really got my attention. If you've ever been to conferences, a lot of times it's like, meh, come in, this is what we do, especially by the last day when everybody's tired and they're like, just have some swag and go away. This kid was like out there on the floor, fired up. And that kind of set the tone for me about what kind of company they are. And ever since then, they've been on my radar of stuff. In fact, after reading this last night, you guys hear me say that, oh yeah, they're on my list of things that I want to do. And you know what? If we don't make the time to do things, we're never just going to discover the time to do things. Oh yeah, okay, so Nuno Captain Corsair says audio all good. YouTube now says excellent connection. Thank you, YouTube, for validating my existence. Anyway, if we don't make the time to do things, we're never just going to discover the time. So after reading this article, I said, you know what? I'm in the process of redeploying my home cluster. I'm just going to drop Glue on there instead of the Nginx ingress controller. And I'm just going to do it. And then I'll figure out what that actually means and start to use their API gateway functionality. And that's how we'll go forth. So look for information from me being like, what? As I figure out how to actually make this thing work. Their service mesh, before I move to the next thing, their service mesh hub, she talks about this in the article. they recognize that people are deploying lots of different service meshes and that maybe you need a means to have them communicate with one another. But if they speak different languages, essentially, how do you do that? So they built an abstraction layer above it that not only allows service meshes to communicate with one another, but also creates a unified language for configuration of service mesh groups and also for configuration of different service mesh types using this common language, right? That's super intelligent, super convenient, super, hey, let's help our community do the things that they want to do better and faster. And the best way I could come up to describe what it might be is that it's like Rancher, but for service mesh. Don't need to highlight that. Litmus. I was supposed to open all these tabs before and have them all ready for you, but okay. Litmus. We talked about Litmus the last couple of days. They started posting tutorials on YouTube. They have this new channel. They have 56 subscribers. Let's all go over to the Litmus channel and subscribe. You can see I already did last night. You can click the notification bell if you want. That's on you. They put up a new playlist yesterday with tutorials. And these are like in-depth. You see they've got only 2 of them up right now, but they're going to be putting more up. One's 30 minutes, one's 40 minutes long. They've been accepted into the CNCF. Let's show them some support by subscribing to their channel and helping them get the word out. I know the guys over at Maya Data, they're really solid people. They make a bunch of really good products, and I would like to see the community learn more about this particular application that they've. I was just going to switch to a different camera. Excuse me for a moment while I drink some coffee. Oh, okay, this next one. I got super excited by the next one until I realized it costs money. But it doesn't actually cost that much money. I just really like playing with things that are free to figure out if they're useful before... Wojtek! Cześć! Wojtek says, greetings from Poland. I lived in Krakow for 3 years. I love seeing people from Poland join the channel. What's up? Okay. 7:42. I got time. If you've ever used EFS, Elastic File System, Elastic File System, it's basically Amazon's NFS. Now, back in the day, right, you got Amazon EC2 nodes, and you need some kind of, hey, Wojtek was born in Krakow. Nice. I really, really, really want to get back to Poland and visit. I haven't been there in years. I loved living there. Okay, sorry, I got distracted. NFS. You think, okay, NFS is good, right? NFS, it's existed since the 70s or 80s or something. It's stable, and it's useful for things like shared content. So if you've got 100 EC2 nodes all serving web content, you need something that allows you to just post your content in one place so that it's shared. Like, this is just standard system administration architectural stuff. And Amazon didn't have NFS. So people were building their own NFS servers, and that created a whole other thing. So then they came out with EFS. And everyone was like, yay, it's NFS for EC2. And it's dynamic, so you basically get billed for whatever you're using. You don't set file system sizes. You just drop content in there, and you're off to the races. But what people didn't know, and I haven't looked at EFS in depth for quite a while, so maybe some of this has been fixed, but I suspect not. EFS throughput is directly correlated to the amount of data that you have in the file system. So if you are a small organization or you have a small site or you have a small amount of content, you will actually get really, really terrible throughput. Excuse me for a moment while I call. Do that backwards? Did I mute myself? I unmuted myself and then coughed. If you heard that, I apologize. Anyway. Whatever. So you get terrible throughput, like worse than dial-up throughput. And when EFS first launched, there were companies who were actually dropping a terabyte of data into their EFS stores just so that they could get reasonable throughput to serve the small amount of content that they needed. So they just dumped garbage in there. Of course, you're billed for what you put in there, so suddenly EFS was costing them money for data that they weren't actually using, and so on and so forth. ever since the beginning, that's kind of soured me on EFS, but you need some kind of an NFS solution for the places where you need NFS. I have videos on how to do NFS inside of Kubernetes, but it's got its own risks and stuff. I saw this last night, Objective FS, which I've never heard of before. They ran small file tests against EFS in both burst mode and standard mode that showed, hang on, small file performance. Oh, come on, where is it? Setup, large sequential writes, large sequential reads. Where's the data? Large sequential write performance, 10 gig file. Setup, summary. Did they change the article overnight? Oh, this is large file performance, that's why. Small file performance, there we go. I was clicking through and I didn't scroll back. They showed, so they took the 762 meg file, so archive, that had 54,000 small files and 3,657 directories. That's just a lot. So they basically unpacked the Linux 472 kernel source. And what they were able to demonstrate is that doing this on EFS, I'm scrolling this slowly so that we can, okay, here we go. Doing it on EFS, it took 1,400 seconds to complete the untar in burst mode and 1,357 seconds to do it in standard mode. With Objective FS, it took 11 seconds. 11 seconds, 125 times faster. So I saw this and I was like, what the heck is Objective FS? Basically, it uses S3 as a backing store, or depending on how much you're paying, you can use your own object store like Ceph or Minio. And it presents a POSIX file system to multiple clients. So it basically does all of your synchronization. So you just drop a file in a directory on one system and it shows up on the others, which is much like how NFS works. But it's actually backed by the 6 billion nines of S3 and clearly works a lot faster than the alternatives. It works on Linux, it works on Mac OS, and if you want to get started with it, unfortunately, there's no free tier. But there's a cheap tier. So you can get started with it for 3 instances for $49, and then you can scale up $10 per instance over that. If you are doing anything with NFS, look at this. This is ridiculous. And I wasted a lot of time on it. Moving on. Oh yeah, so there you go. Objective FS, there's their homepage. Sealed secrets for Kubernetes. I didn't scroll to the top. Come on. Sealed secrets for Kubernetes. If you do anything with Ansible, then you're probably familiar with the Ansible Vault. If you come to any of my trainings, or if you've seen anything about committing stuff to source code repositories with your Kubernetes manifests or whatever, you've heard me and other people say, don't commit secrets accidentally because that's bad. And in a moment, you'll actually see GitLab has a whole thing that can monitor that. Rancher actually got an email from GitHub a few years ago where a secret accidentally got committed and they picked it up and they shut down the repo until we were able to fix it. So like, it's a big deal. It happens accidentally. So this project, Sealed Secrets, turns your secrets into, basically does one-way encryption so that you can commit them to a repository if you so desire. They cannot be decrypted except by an actual secret in the controller in the Kubernetes cluster itself. So that's neat. This allows you to use things like customize and to go more towards a GitOps model where you actually don't have to worry and remember to do things. One of my things that I always say is anything that a human being has to remember to do will eventually fail. Because it will. So this is a step to take away that worry. Kubernetes local static provisioner. What if you're in a Kubernetes cluster on bare metal and you don't have anything else besides local disks? You don't have NFS, you don't have Objective FS, you don't have a NAS for iSCSI. What do? Well, there's local path. And local path is different from host path. Host path creates a directory on a host, but it's not actually bound to the host. So if the workload gets rescheduled, it'll just create another directory that's empty. And that's not very useful if the other directory had content. So local path is what Kubernetes came up with that allows the workload to remember what host it was on when it provisioned that local path. Well, that's great. If that's all you have, it's better than nothing for persistent storage, but it's still not good because if you nuke that host or it goes down, there go your workloads. This article talks about how to use local path, talks about the static provisioner. The local path static provisioner, not this one, but Rancher also created one. That's the default storage class in K3s, because K3s ultimately, we want to be able to make single node clusters as easily as possible. But if you're in a situation on bare metal where you only have actual disks, use Longhorn. Even if you just use Longhorn with a single replica, then you don't have any of the fault tolerance, but you can do 2 replicas. And now if your workload moves, if your host is down, well, you've still got the replica, you've still got the content, you can still get on with your life. And you can actually lose hosts, bring up other hosts, and it'll create new replicas for you. Longhorn is dead simple to get started with. So if you're in this situation, take a look at that. We're going to run out of time again. GitLab. GitLab has a thing called GitLab Secure, which is an additional layer of security checking and response for repositories and CI/CD pipelines, and it hooks into other products for doing image vulnerability scanning and things like that. I wanted to show you this article because it presents a plausible scenario of a multi-pronged attack against an application and explains how an attacker might compromise this and then use the information from that to compromise this, how they might not even compromise your application, but they might compromise libraries that you depend on so that you just bundle those in. And for every single vulnerability or prong of that attack, they present information on how you can remediate it, how you can remediate it with GitLab Secure, and a video that shows that remediation in action. This is a great article. I love GitLab. I love how much they do to empower the community without even having to pay for their stuff, because that really makes me feel that there's value in paying for the extra stuff. This is not available in their community tier. It's available in their gold and ultimate tiers, but you can still watch the videos and read the article and learn a lot about what you can do in your own workloads with your own solutions. Torsten Volk is some kind of data scientist dude. I don't have enough time to talk about his stuff, but I'm still going to post his link in the description. He's created 124 different things out here that take data from all over the internet and turn it into charts and visualizations. And in here is stuff about interesting Kubernetes content, questions on Stack Overflow, GitHub stars, and star velocity for various projects. It's kind of a bit of a rabbit hole. If you just get into it, you start looking around. Some of it's useful, some of it's not, but all of it is interesting if you have any interest in taking data and turning it into visualizations that a human can process. All right, I have to now select what I'm going to talk about. eBay. eBay uses Jenkins for everything. They run Jenkins inside of their Kubernetes clusters, and Jenkins credentials are used to do a lot of things. But Jenkins itself doesn't have a really good way of storing those credentials. So they wrote and open sourced a plugin for Jenkins that bridges between Jenkins credentials and Kubernetes secrets. When Jenkins starts up, it pulls the secrets that it owns out of Kubernetes and turns them into credentials. And then through the Jenkins UI, whenever a change is made to a credential or a credential is added, it converts that into a Kubernetes secret. They open sourced it a while ago, month ago, something like that, but they only announced it yesterday with a really nice blog article that talks about how it works. If you're using Jenkins and you're interested in better credentials management, then this might be something for you to take a look at. Okay. This is the tool of the day. The tool of the day is a really big logo. Somebody clearly needs to work on their CSS. This article starts with, you might wonder what the heck is Helm File. And that's good, because when I saw this, the first question was, what the heck is Helm File? Helm File is to Helm what Docker Compose is to Docker. Huh. Okay. Why do we need an abstraction in front of Helm? This article, first of all, Helm File is actually over here, and ignore the fact that it's failing CI right now. It says that it's alpha, but it's actually got a lot of activity. It's been around for like 3 years, so I would still look at it and use it. If you've ever deployed Cert Manager, a few versions ago, they changed it to where you have to deploy CRDs before you can actually do the Helm install. So that's a 2-step process, and it breaks automation. That's actually part of the reason why Rancher pulled Cert Manager out of the application catalog, is because we couldn't guarantee a one-click deployment. I'm looking at the chat. I'm actually going to talk about what you just wrote there, Captain Corsair, in just a second. With Helm File, you can create hooks to run before the actual Helm installation. So he demonstrates here how you can have a pre-sync hook that does an idempotent installation of Cert Manager. Idempotent simply meaning it checks if it's there. If it's not, it installs it. If it is, it just no ops. This allows you to do multi-phase stuff even before the Helm installation, or even after the Helm installation, if there's other things that you need to do. And a few days ago, somebody was asking me about how to do version control with Helm charts, not the charts, but how to version control what version of the Helm chart has been installed. And I didn't have a very good answer for him. In fact, I didn't really have an answer at all. This would solve that requirement. But then you look at, well, what are the other tools out there that can do this? And Captain Corsair says, just use Arcade. Yes, Arcade, from our good friend Alex Ellis, can do an installation of Cert Manager with a one-liner. Arcade is an excellent tool that can also do lots of other things. It can install command line utilities and Kubernetes, kube control plugins, and a bunch of other applications. However, in order for an application to go into Arcade, somebody has to make a Go file that does all of these things for you. This is still another layer of abstraction, except if you're using Arcade, you have to wait for somebody to do this, or you have to go and do it yourself, which means you have to understand Go, and you have to go through all of the testing and all of the whatever. But with a tool like Helm File, well, it's just like Docker Compose. You can just write a shell script to do the preliminary steps, and then write this other little piece of language stuff, and then use it to do your installation. Both of them have a place. Arcade is wonderful. Helm File also looks like it might be pretty wonderful, and solves problems that Arcade doesn't. So I saw this, and I thought this would be an excellent tool of the day because, well, mostly because the guy a couple of days ago was asking me how we could do this exact same thing. If you use this or you take a look at it, please let me know in the comments or let me know on Twitter or anything else. Captain Corsair. Use the tool that works best for you. Part of the objective here is that I can share with you what's out there so that we can make decisions on what we want to use. And sometimes, you might need this hammer, you might need that hammer. I have multiple hammers, I have a nail gun. Use the tool that's right for the job, and that might change from job to job. Let's real quick go through the chats. And see, Jean says dzień dobry. Yes, I suppose I don't actually know you to say cześć, but dzień dobry. When I lived in Poland, I don't actually speak Polish, but what little Polish I spoke with a really nice Polish accent. So I would walk into restaurants and they'd be like, dobry wieczór, which is, good evening. And they say it to see if you respond in Polish or if you respond in English. If you say, hello, can I have a menu, please? Then they're like, yeah, sure. But I would respond, dobry wieczór. And then they would speak to me in Polish, in which point I would respond in perfect Polish that I don't speak Polish. And then that was very confusing. So I don't do that anymore. I had the same problem in Spanish. I now live in Chile. So Okay. What do we got? We got a lot of hellos. We got Sebastian from Argentina. Hello. Alpha 5 from Indonesia. Hello. And yes, Sebastian, we are near to one another. I can throw a rock at the mountains, and I had a joke with somebody that I would send a 6-pack of cerveza over the Andes Mountains to Argentina. My drone. Wait, you tested WSL way on K3D. Yes. Deep knowledge of Polish. Dobry noc. Oh gosh, it's been so long since I've lived in Poland. I won't butcher Polish by saying I don't speak Polish in Polish. Besides, everybody else who doesn't speak Polish will not be interested in that. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. We are out of here. I was able to get through everything that I have for you today. Let me switch back to this camera, and let me roll my outro. So, thank you so much for joining me today. All of the links to this are going to be in the video description, and I'm actually going to do something different today where I'm still sending out a tweet saying thank you to everybody, but I'm going to send out a series of tweets throughout the day for the specific things that we talked about and see if maybe that's better for people. I don't know. If you like or don't like as I change things and try and figure out what works, just let me know if it's good or bad, and I'll take that into consideration. But the links will be in the video description as soon as the show ends. If you follow me on Twitter, you will get a notification when that happens. If you have something that you'd like for me to consider for the show, hit me up and let me know. I mean, I scour the internet, but I'm also looking for input from all of you who are out there doing things as well. Let's share our knowledge so that all of us grow. My contact details are in the video description. You can also tweet with the CNCN hashtag, and one of us will pick it up. If I mentioned a tool that you use, tell us in the comments. And of course, I have to say this, if you liked what you saw today, click the subscribe button, click the like button, click the little bell, click all of those things. That helps the YouTube algorithm. Share the content with other people. You'll also get a notification when the next show starts. I will be here every weekday for as long as there's something to talk about. And since I keep running over time, clearly there's lots to talk about. Have a great day, everyone. Keep on learning.